Bore da i chi gyd, gobeithio eich bod yn cadw'n dda a diolch yn fawr iawn i chi am ymuno gyda ni ar gyfer ein gwem yna eich cefnogi i baratoi i gyflwyno'r gymhwyster lefel 3 mewn gosod briciau. Good morning to you all. Thank you for joining us. Hope you're keeping well. The webinar this morning will be to help you to prepare to deliver the level 3 qualification in bricklaying. Rydym dal yn gweithio adre, felly ymddeiriadau ymlaen llaw am unrhyw sŵn yn y cefndir ac unrhyw oedi yn y sleidiau. We are still working from home, therefore I apologise in advance for any background noise and any delay in the slides. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn copi o'r pwynt pŵer yma a recordiad o'r webinar yn ogystal â thysysgrif i gadarnhau eich presenoldeb ar ôl y webinar. Fe gallwch ddod o hyd i bob recordiad o'n gwebinarau blaenorol ar ein gwefan Sgiliau i Gymru. Gallwch hefyd gofrestru ar gyfer ein gwebinarau sydd i ddod ar y wefan. You will receive an email with a copy of the PowerPoint, the recording of this webinar, and the certificate of attendance after this webinar. You can access the recordings to all previous webinars and register for upcoming webinars on our Skills for Wales website. Fe fyddwch yn derbyn e-bost gyda linc i'n harolwg. Byddem yn ddiolchgar iawn pydach chi'n cymeryd yr amser i lenwi ein harolwg, gan bod eich adborth yn werthfawr iawn i ni. You will receive an email with a link to a survey. We would be very grateful if you could take the time to fill in this survey, as your feedback is very valuable to us. Fe fyddwn yn rhoi links defnyddiol i fewn i'r chat yn ystod y webinar. We will be putting some useful links in the chat function during this webinar. Felly dyma beth byddwn ni'n trafod heddiw. This is what we will be discussing in the webinar this morning. Fe fyddwn yn sôn yn fras pam y trawsnewid yma wedi digwydd i'r cymwysterau yma. Yna fe fyddwn yn edrych ar gynnwys y gymhwyster lefel 3 gan edrych yn benodol ar gosod briciau. Fe fyddwn yn edrych ar strwythur yr unedau ac hefyd yn rhoi crynodeb o'r asesiad i chi. Fe fyddwn yn dangos canllaw cadarnhad y cyflogwr i chi ac yna'n edrych ar yr adnoddau dysgu sydd ar gael. Yna fyddwn yn mynd trwy camau nesaf gyda chi. Ac ar y diwedd, fe fydd yna gyfle i chi ofyn unrhyw gwestiynau i ni. Plis manteisiwch ar y cyfle yma gan rhoi eich cwestiynau yn y tab cwestiynau sydd ar llaw dde o'ch sgrin yn ystod y cyflwyniad. We will look at the content of the level 3 qualification, looking specifically at bricklaying. We will look at the structure of the unit and then the summary of the assessment. We will take a look at the employee confirmation guide, and then we will show you the learning resources that are available for you. And then we will discuss the next steps with you. And then at the end, there will be an opportunity for you to ask us any questions. Please type in any questions that you have in the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen during the presentation. Dyma i chi pwy sydd ar y webinar heddi. Here's who's on the webinar today. We have David Pye, who's the Technical Advisor for City and Guilds. We have Jason Howe, who's the Technical Advisor for Construction, City and Guilds. Also have Ian Roberts, who's the Technical Advisor for Construction, City and Guilds. And myself, Angharad Lloyd-Bainan, I'm the Policy Stakeholder and Partnership Manager at City and Guilds. Felly pam mae'r trawsnewid yma wedi digwydd? Why has this transformation happened? In February 2018, Qualifications Wales published the Building the Future report, which was a sector review of the qualifications and the qualification system in construction and the built environment in Wales. Some of Qualifications Wales' outlined findings were that there were inconsistent assessment practice, some areas of learning not effectively assessed, learners needed to deal with a range of tasks to be able to problem solve. The qualifications weren't meeting skills needs of Wales. And there was a need to reduce the complexity of the system and also a need to improve coherence with clear pathways. There also needed to be clear progression routes and throughout the framework and on to work or higher education. Therefore, City and Guilds and EL are two awarding bodies who have come together to collaborate on the development of a suite of construction and building services engineering qualifications for Wales. On this next slide, it shows the type of questions you may have regarding the Level 3 qualification. I won't go through this slide. As I mentioned earlier, you will be receiving a copy of this presentation. On this slide, it shows the transition arrangements that are available for a learner. It shows the different progression routes that are available for a learner. For example, a learner would do a broad level 1, then onto a foundation qualification, then a progression, then an apprenticeship, or there's the option for the learner to go straight into the apprenticeship alongside with the core. Hoffwn nawr eich trosglwyddo i Jason, a fydd yn eich tywysg trwy y sleidiau nesaf. I would now like to pass you over to Jason, who will take you through the next few slides. Diolch. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne-Harrod, and good morning, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay. Before we start, I just wanted to highlight that if you wanted to take a closer look at what we are presenting today, all of the qualification handbooks and assessment packs are all on the Skills for Wales website, and I would encourage you all, if you haven't already, to go on and start accessing that material. Next slide, please, Ian. So just a bit of a recap and also an overview of the new qualifications in Wales. So firstly, the column on the left-hand side, what you can see there is the foundation and core qualification. And that consists of 10 trades, including the BSc. Next, we have the progression, of which we have 9 trades. And for the purpose of today, we have the construction level 3. And obviously, we're focusing on bricklaying, but you can see all of the other level 3 qualification options on there. City and Guilds and EAL have worked collaboratively on these suites of qualifications, but for what we're discussing today, the development has been by City and Guilds. Next slide, please, Ian. So just to have a look at the rules of combination, the 6 mandatory units, which are numbered 301 to 306, and within this as well, there's also 1 trade-specific unit. And for the purpose of this, it is bricklaying, obviously. And within the pathway of bricklaying, there are 7 units, which we'll come on to shortly. Learners must achieve a pass grade or higher in the 3 assessment methods for this qualification. And again, we will cover that in a little bit more detail as we go through the presentation. The total GLH assigned to this qualification is 1,094 GLH, and that also includes the 76 hours for assessment. And the GLH for this qualification is covered by both the training provider and within industry. Next slide, please, Ian. So these are the common core units which we've just mentioned, which is 301 to 306. And on the slide there, it just highlights which unit numbers they are, the individual unit titles, and the allocation of the GLH assigned to those units. So, for example, if we select unit 302, working in the construction sector within Wales, it's 40 GLH, and that covers 2 learning outcomes. So if you were to have a look at the qualification handbook, you'd see it's learning outcome 1, which is understanding the built environment in Wales, and learning outcome 2, which is understand how to work effectively with others. And again, I just encourage you all to have a good look at the qualification handbook and familiarise yourself with that. Next slide, please, Ian. So now we're moving on to the bricklaying specific units. So in addition to the 6 common core units, which is also highlighted in this table, we can see that there are 7 units aligned to the bricklaying. And again, the unit numbers are set with the unit titles and then the allocation of the GLH. And each bricklaying unit has their own bespoke GLH aligned to the unit content and learning outcomes that are contained within it. And then as we can see at the bottom there, that gives you the grand total GLH. Next slide, please, Ian. So now we're going to have a quick look at the unit summary and how they are portrayed within the qualification handbooks. So forgive me if this is not new territory for you, but for the purpose of those that may be new to this, we are going to cover learning outcomes, assessment criteria and range. But the information that we have provided aims to give a good overview of how the unit content is structured and how the areas of content relate to each other, as well as the qualification, delivery and assessment. If you are familiar with City and Guilds qualifications previously, you'll see that the qualification handbook format is fairly standardized with previous qualifications in appearance. So hopefully it'll be quite familiar to you. So initially we have the learning outcomes, and these are grouped together chunks of practical skills and knowledge that are presented as a result of the learning process. and it is what a learner must understand or be able to do following and including teaching and learning. After that, we have the assessment criteria, and this breaks the learning outcome down into small areas and a bit more detail that needs to be covered, and it's these criteria that will be assessed in connection with that learning outcome. Following that, we have the range. Now, this contains information on the breadth required with regards to the specific assessment criterion. We have to remember, though, that the range is not an exhaustive list, and you may want to include your own examples and other content within that, and that is perfectly fine. But it is advised, obviously, that all elements of the range are covered within the teaching and learning to allow the learner to be fully engaged and get all of the content that's required for the unit and learning outcome. Next slide, please. So we're going to have a look at it in a little bit more detail. And what we can see on the screen now is basically a shot of what the qualification handbook would look like. So initially we start with the unit number and title. And for the purpose of this, obviously it is Unit 301, which is Understanding Construction Practices in Wales. Following that, you'll also have the individually aligned GLH to that unit, and that is also displayed on the screen. And then there's just a brief description of what the unit is about. And these can be used when you're putting together material during the recruitment process or informing learners of what's coming within the next unit of content, just so that they're a little bit ahead of the game. They may want to do some pre-reading, etc. And then after that, we have the learning outcomes. And on the next slide, we're going to look at how that portrays in a bit more detail. So as mentioned, we've got the learning outcome for Unit 301, and that has its number and title, followed by the criteria and the range. Now that is, hopefully fairly familiar to a lot of you. What is new is we have the delivery outcome, and here what this does, you can see how it's expanded on the depth of content that the learner will have to cover, and this is the expansion which will hopefully fulfill the GLH for the unit and provide you with the additional guidance that you will need when planning to deliver your content. So it'll give you a good depth of content with regards to what is required in delivery. So hopefully with the information on the screen there, you'll be provided with all of the relevant tools in order to start planning the delivery of your teaching and learning and hopefully formative assessment. Next slide, please, Ian. Just as a way of a comparison, this is one of the units from Bricklaying. Sorry, this is a screenshot from one of the units within the Bricklaying units. So again, the structure is exactly the same with the unit number and title at the top, followed by the GLH, and then a brief description of what the unit is about and what it contains, followed by the learning outcomes. Next slide, please, Ian. And then finally, again, similarly to the core units, you have the learning outcome and number title. So the criteria and the range that needs to be covered, and the delivery outcome, which covers the depth of content. And this is, like I've said, very familiar and very standardized across all of the units contained within the qualification handbooks. I hope that's been helpful to you and informative. I'd now like to pass you over to my colleague Ian, who's going to take you through the next set of slides. Thank you, Ian.
Thank you, Jason, and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. And I'd like to commence by going through the next section, which is the summary of assessments. So the Bricklaying Level 3 qualification is assessed using 3 methods of assessments. And as you can see, initially what we've got there is the on-screen assessment, which is multiple choice questions, externally set and externally marked. And they, like the foundation and the progression, as an overall weighting of 20%. You will see that this will include test 1 and test 2, which I will come back to you when we go into a little bit deeper, greater depth as we start looking into it moving forward. The practical project, covering the trade area that they are working towards. This is carried out within industry, not like your foundation or your progression, where it's carried in with a simulated environment. This is actually a realistic working environment while they're actually in employment, carrying out the day-to-day working activities. This will be set in agreement with the employer and assessed by assessor employed by the training provider. This will then be externally quality assured and has an overall weighting of 60%. The professional discussion now is different or slightly different to what we've had on the progression and the foundation, which we've classed as the guided discussion. This one is externally set and externally marked by a trade-specific member of the awarding organisation and has an overall weighting of 20%. We will be going through each method of assessment in the up and coming slides. But before I move on, I would like to reinforce, like Jason's already mentioned, we have an assessment pack detailing the requirements of the assessments, and these can be downloaded from the Skills for Wales website. Within this slide, I would just like to start to go through a little bit deeper in depth on each method of assessment. The on-screen assessment contains two tests, Test 1 and Test 2, and can be taken at any stage in the assessment process. Although this is on demand and completed at any time, it is advisable to try and complete prior to the professional discussion. Test 1 contains 45 questions and the learner will have 70 minutes to complete. However, this may have been completed during their second year, or if it's a learner who may have completed their progression qualification, will have achieved this as this is the same test. And the reason this being is that the progression units are mapped directly across into the level 3 qualification, as they are the knowledge and the criteria and the skills is directly extracted from the occupational competency statements set by industry. Test 2 is completed in their final year and has 44 questions and has a timing for the learner to complete in 70 minutes. The practical project, this is made up of 3 elements or tasks, and I'll call them elements at this moment in time. Very similar to what we have in the foundation and progression, which starts with the planning, performing and evaluating are the 3 main criteria. The difference being is that the project is carried out in the realistic working environment, and they can select from a number of tasks that are outlined within the assessment pack and cannot exceed any more than 4 work-based tasks. The assessor employed by the training provider will carry out live assessments, and these will be visits which will include observing live performance, seeing the learner performing different tasks at different stages, and will include a minimum of 3 visits. The professional discussion will be carried out by a member of the awarding organisation and will be occupationally competent. This will be carried out in a one-time sitting and will either be virtual or face-to-face. The professional discussion will last no more than 40 minutes and will be graded pass to distinction, just like the practical project and the on-screen assessments. The learner will need to demonstrate their knowledge, understanding and performance from the occupational standards relevant to their trade. They will also be required to reflect on the practical project they have completed within their discussion. And the professional discussion can only take place once the learner has completed their project and the employer confirmation guide, which we will go through shortly. Online assessments will contain engaging multiple choice question types and styles and are all online with results received immediately after the assessment. When a learner has successfully achieved the progression qualification in their chosen route, then they are exempt from test 1. And if they haven't, then they have to sit and achieve test 1 accordingly. The outcome is that if the learner has not taken the progression qualification, then they have to sit and achieve both tests 1 and 2. And here you can see on the right of the slide assessment information for test 2, which contains 44 questions, and they would require a minimum of 30 correct responses to attain a minimum of a pass. And this information is contained in the assessment packs, which are on the Skills for Wales website. We are now going to cover in a little bit more detail on the practical project. The learner will have 12 hours to complete all of their planning, and this may include up to 4 tasks or projects, but we'll class them as tasks to be able to move forward. Then they have 50 hours to complete the performing, and 12 hours then to complete the evaluation of the relevant tasks that they have included within their project. Just a gentle reminder, ladies and gentlemen, that the project cannot include any more than 4 work-based tasks. The various tasks are outlined within the assessment pack. As previous, further information can be located, as we've mentioned earlier, on the practical project section of the assessment pack. And as you can see, employer or the assessor can provide any pro forma templates required to support the planning activity. For example, risk assessments or method statements that the employer may have already adopted. But the learner must clearly record the total time spent on each plan. With regards to the professional discussion, here you can see a brief overview of the content and timings. The learner will have to reflect on the units we have identified on this slide, along with the learner reflection on the practical project. This should help you in supporting the learner in being prepared to meet the external assessor. Project documentation can be available during their professional discussion to help the learner be able to make reference to accordingly. And as you can see, the discussion will have to be recorded and captured in a secure GDPR compliant way. And before we move on, once again, just as a gentle reminder, the professional discussion will be conducted by a competent external assessor through a member of the regulatory body. So, summary of assessments. We're all aware that there is no MVQ within the level 3 qualification. Learners, however, will still have to gain the skills and knowledge within industry to carry out and fulfill their role within the construction sector. Within this slide, we can make reference to the employer confirmation, and now this will help support the learner in meeting the qualification requirements and attaining their CSCS card. Sections and criteria outlined within the employer confirmation guide are fully mapped to the National Occupational Competency Statements, which is set by industry, and all criteria has to be met. The guide, which I will provide a brief overview, provides guidance to employers and training providers and how the occupational competency statements set by industry have been met. The overall qualification will be graded accordingly, and that will be through from pass through to distinction. And this will help differentiate the achievement between learners. Provisional grades for the practical project will undergo internal and external quality assurance. The professional discussion, the external assessor will confirm the grade. The overall final grade for any construction level 3 qualifications will be issued by City and Guilds. Regarding resits, learners can resit assessments or make a resubmission when a learner fails to achieve a pass grade in any of the assessments. And although I'm going to provide a brief overview within the next few slides, you can locate a more in-depth guidance on the resit, etc. within the assessment pack. This slide provides a brief overview of the resit and resubmissions. Taking the on-screen assessment, although there are no limits to the number of times a learner can take, you should provide additional learning prior to any retake. We all know retake takes time and effort, and of course it'll be an additional cost incurred. It is therefore in everyone's interest to try and ensure the learner is prepared for their assessment, and any retake and any additional learning is carried out prior to actually retaking the assessment. When the learner resits following a failure, the learner can still achieve the full marks and grades available. The practical project, here you can see the opportunities, and rather than having to resit the entire project, they can retake the criteria that they have failed to provide. It is within the margins allowed. For example, regarding the planning, if they do not meet the threshold pass, then they can resubmit the criteria that they have failed, which will be reassessed within the resubmission. Regarding the professional discussion, when a learner fails to successfully achieve, then they are permitted to resit and must resit the all professional discussion. Once again, on a resit, a learner can achieve the full range of marks, and any resits will have to be booked via Walled Garden, which is through City and Guilds. Before I begin, may I take this opportunity to go through the Employer Confirmation Guide. So before I go through the Employer Confirmation Guide, I'd first of all like to say thank you to all stakeholders for their valuable contribution and feedback we have received and are still receiving, to be honest, that has helped us, the consortium, in shaping what I'm about to present. Employer confirmation is part of the learner journey and will help strengthen the relationships between employers, centres and the learner, which is something that the review clearly outlined as a requirement. This is only part of the learner journey, and the process will enhance the employer role in the delivery of the new apprenticeship qualifications in the construction and built environment sector. As we are aware, the learner will spend a considerable amount of their time in the realistic working environment. And the purpose of the confirmation sign-off is to capture the activities and provide stakeholders, including trade bodies, confidence that the learner is occupationally proficient and has covered the full range of the relevant standards to allow the learner to progress to the final part of their assessment process, which is the professional discussion. Although there is no NVQ within the new apprenticeship model, a learner will still provide a range of evidence that allows the centre to check the employer confirmatory sign-off is valid. Upon successful completion of the robust assessment process and the confirmatory sign-off, a learner will be in a position to attain the relevant skills card. We are aware that the employer confirmation process is new and may raise a few concerns. But please don't be concerned, because the consortium will provide centres and employers with instructions and the requirements for completing this process within the employer confirmation guide, which will be further communicated at our centre and employer events. We are currently in the stage of planning and scheduling further webinars or face-to-face meetings, and once they are confirmed, we'll then be putting them on the Skills for Wales website for people to be able to register and gain more knowledge and understanding on how to work in this document and complete it accordingly. Here we can see how working collaboratively we can support the learner along their journey that they will require to move forward and progress to their final assessment of what is a robust assessment process, the professional discussion. As you can see on the slide, by working together, employers and centres will provide opportunities that will allow the learner to gain valuable industrial experience and complete all of the activities outlined within the employer confirmation guide. Whether it be 1, 2 or 3 employers that the learner will work with throughout their apprenticeship. Hence the reasons why we have made provisions on the forms within the employer confirmation guide, which are forms A and B, for more than 1 employer to work on the documents. And this is to help cover the shared apprenticeship schemes that's currently out there at this moment in time. Work-based learning providers and centres will work with employers to guide and support to ensure the occupational competency statement log is being completed. As you can see, the pieces start to come together, and this is through, as we've mentioned previously, working collaboratively together to ensure the learner journey runs smoothly. This process, as we've mentioned earlier, is to ensure the learner is prepared for their final assessment. As you can imagine, this hasn't been a smooth journey, as change is always and sometimes very difficult to accept. We have engaged with a considerable number of stakeholders, including micro businesses, medium to large contractors and federations, including colleges and private training providers. This has helped bring this document together. We fully understand there is still a lot of concerns out there and still a lot of communication to be done before this can be fully embedded. We're hoping that you'll see that in the coming months. Within this slide, you'll see the front cover of what the employer confirmation guide will look like, and a section that is contained within the guide. Like we've mentioned earlier, whether it be 1, 2 or 3 employers, they will work with learners throughout their apprenticeship. Hence we've made that provision for more than 1 employer to work on the document. The document will be in a writable PDF and can be completed either electronically or hard copy. The employer confirmation is the responsibility of the employer and the learner working collaboratively with the learning provider. Although not part of the qualification, this has to be completed prior to the learner moving forward to complete their final assessment, the professional discussion. We will be holding further webinars, as I've mentioned earlier, focusing on the employer confirmation guide in the very near future. So please look out for the dates and on how to register. And these webinars will just not be for centres or private training providers. We'll also be running events at a time that will suit employers to ensure that they have every opportunity to join these webinars. But we do have close links, and we're working collaboratively and closely with CITB, the National Federation of Builders, the Federation of Master Builders, the Federation of Small Builders. We are working collaboratively with as many as we possibly can to get this message out, to support that learner journey accordingly. Moving forward now, I'd now like to just cover briefly the resources that we have available. We have various support material available for you to view that are located on our Skills for Wales website. You will find, when you click on the qualification tab, that will take you to all of our qualifications. And then by clicking on the qualification that you're interested in or working towards, you can then find the qualification handbook, the relevant assessment pack, and then the employer confirmation guide as well. So there you can see them as you're actually working through accordingly. And there's other various literatures on there as well that may be of benefit for you. Yes, it's the annual activity planner again. Once again, we've shown you the annual activity planner that I've no doubt you're all familiar with, having attended the foundation and progression webinars. But we'd encourage you to adopt this document if you haven't already something similar in place. Feedback we are receiving is that centres are finding this document useful and easy to complete. Not only that, it identifies the unit numbers, the weeks that they're working towards, and you can then plan accordingly with the employer what can be carried out within a college and training environment and what can be carried out within industry. This is no dissimilar to what we've been used to delivering at this moment in time. The only differences at this moment is that there's no NVQ, but the learner has still got to gather their evidence and meet the relevant requirements through the employer confirmation guide. We're still having to meet industry standards, which is outlined within the occupational competency statements. So we still have to plan and deliver accordingly over the time that's there. We are finding that some centres haven't planned effectively and are experiencing difficulties when it comes round to setting the assessments now. So it's something, please bear in mind about planning accordingly. This is just a recap that there is various materials available, and Hodden, who produce a number of textbooks, would like to hear from anyone who has any views on what has or not been developed. What they're looking at as well, and they're currently on with at this moment in time, is mapping the current textbooks, the levels 2 and 3 in the various trade areas, across to the level 3 criteria that's outlined within the specific units. But we've also got to remember, we've already got the learning resources that we've been delivering for the past few years. And although there is some amendments, some slight alterations to the criteria that's in there, you already have a considerable amount of material that is already there for you to use. So what's the next steps? Moving on, I have no doubt that you're all aware of the progress everyone is making in working towards the end of goal and seeing the implementation of the level 3 qualifications. And I would like to spend a few minutes with you going through the next steps and commencing with the centre approval. Here you can see that the centre approval actually commenced in January 2021 with the foundation and progression, and is now closely followed by the level 3 qualification. And may I recommend, and provided you haven't already gained centre approval, the following slides may help provide a broad overview of the approval journey for centres. Excuse me. As we are aware, these are brand new qualifications, and an offline application has to be completed if you've not already done so. And this is available in the Become a Centre section on the Skills for Wales website, and is for all qualifications and for both awarding bodies. And what I mean by both awarding bodies is that our partners, EAL, look after the building services engineering sector for the progression and the level 3 qualifications. Centres only need to complete one application on completion, and it should then be forwarded to skillsforwales.quality@cityandguilds.com. This section also contains centre frequently asked questions around the approval process. When your application has been submitted, the application will be reviewed by both EAL and City and Guilds quality teams. If there are any incomplete sections or some of the detail isn't clear, we'll ask the centre for this detail before we can progress with it. The consortium will then allocate an EQA to complete either a remote or face-to-face approval activity. Separate approvals must also be submitted for your sub-centres. I know some colleges have 4 or 5 different centres located throughout Wales, so each one would have to have its own application submitted. Centres should adapt what they have. For example, activity planners, sampling plans, etc. You do not need to create new brand or new documents. The IQA documentation that you've currently got in place will suffice. Some may have to just do some fine tuning with it to make sure they're comfortable with it, but it's the college's documentation that we will be monitoring moving forward. The EQA then will complete an approval report outlining recommendations for approval, what was reviewed, staff spoken to, qualifications requirements met, etc. And then the EQA then would submit the report to skillsforwales.quality@cityandguilds.com. And then it's a different one for the EAL, which I won't go through at this moment in time. We will then share the report with the centre, and there is complete transparency between the awarding bodies. The quality team will provide the approval decision in writing, which will come via email. Here we can see future training and events we are going to be holding. These are brand new qualifications, and we recommend you take the time to register onto one of the events, and especially the CPD events that we are holding over the next few months. The CPD events are actually covering how to mark the guided, which can also cover the professional discussion and the project. As you can see, we are holding trade-specific webinars, and this is the first of the ones that we're holding on the trade-specific. And regarding the building service engineering, they are currently being confirmed as we speak today. Moving forward, we will be scheduling in the very near future additional webinars or face-to-face events, continuing to provide the support that will be required, and especially focusing on the employer confirmation guide to make sure everyone is comfortable with that to be able to move forward. What we'd now like to do, ladies and gentlemen, is just pause for a few minutes to allow you the opportunity to add any questions you may have on the questions tab. Following this section, we will then be coming to an end of the webinar, as we only have 2 more slides to go through. So what we'd like to do is, like we've said, just give you a few moments to go through some questions for your time to add the questions, and then we'll go through hopefully all of the questions depending on what time we have left. And if we can't go through them today, then we will definitely add them to our frequently asked questions and forward them on to people to make sure you've got them accordingly. So just for a few moments now, I'd just like you to, a few moments, and then I'll pass you on to Jason. Thank you for now. Okay, Jason, have any questions come in yet?
Yes, Ian, we have a couple. First one is, what level or colour CSCS card will the candidate be able to apply for upon completion of their level 3 qualification?
Good question, that. I mean, we're still in conversation with CSCS, but they'll get a minimum to blue, but hopefully we are working closely, and once they get a more in-depth view of the employee confirmation guide, we'll know more moving on from there. So I hope that answers your question. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. Next one is, for a level 3 qualification, there doesn't seem to be much level 3 practical criteria in the site assessments. If if this qualification has been put in place to raise the standards, how do the practical tasks on site seem easier for the new route as opposed to against the previous NVQ routes?
Thank you. Okay, it's good questions, to be honest, but what we've got to remember is these qualifications have been designed to meet to what the sector of Wales require to be able to move that forward. And what they've done is they've looked at the occupational competency statements from the level 2 and the level 3, and they've blended them accordingly to meet the demands of what the Wales construction sector require. So what you will find is you'll find some of the level 3 qualifications have certain percentage of the level 3 current occupational competency statements or the units built into that, and you'll have some that's got maps all of them across. But that's the reasons why it's been built accordingly, because this framework has been, of the content of the units and the qualification has been built around the needs of the construction industry sector in Wales. So that's probably why you're probably thinking of that. But when you look at it a little bit more closely in depth, especially with the work-based evidence that the learners got together, it's about working collaboratively with industry and seeing how you can meet the requirements between the training provider and the employer to make sure that works through accordingly. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Ian. There is one question, I don't know if you can answer this directly. I have had a look on the website myself. Where are the delivery planners located on the Skills for Wales website? I've had a look myself, I can't seem to locate them or pinpoint them. What we can do is when we follow up with the email following the webinar, we can put a link to the delivery planners in that email if you still can't find it. So I don't know if there's anything else you want to add to that.
Yeah, it's under resources. It is there. It's under resources. I don't know if David's already put the link on at the beginning. He seems to put a few links on. I'm not sure if he's put them all on.
Okay, I'll have a look at that while we answer more questions.
It's on the website, but as you say, if you're not finding them, then we do apologise. But the document, the pro forma is still there for you, so we'll send you the link through. But as I say, they are on there to find. Okay.
Brilliant, thank you. Next one is regarding the 2 externally set tests. Could you explain what the content of test 1 and test 2 will be based on, please?
Yes, the unit content, as I say, it's clearly outlined within the assessment pack and also in the qualification handbook what each test will actually cover. So you can see the criteria and exactly which units they're actually referring to and what percentage of the weighting will also be to each particular to each criteria. So that'll give you a greater depth that you're actually looking for. But what we've got to remember is the test 1, it's for the progression. That's what the learner will cover. So if you get a learner that's working on, he's been unsuccessful on having completed his foundation qualification, and then his second year goes on to the progression. So no learner's disadvantaged on the progression, so they can simply sidestep across them once they do gain employment onto the level 3 qualification. Then that's why the test 1 is exactly the same as what the learner covers on the progression as well as the level 3 qualification. So in greater depth, you'll see the units that it's referring to and the direct criteria and the percentage of the weighting, so the number of questions that would be lined up to that relevant criteria. So it is there to help support you when you go through the books accordingly. Thank you.
That's great, thanks for that. Another question was, can you add anything about the portfolio of evidence that is mentioned in the employer confirmation guides?
Yeah, it's a good question, is this, to be honest. What we don't want to see is the draconian, that's wrong, I suppose. We don't want to see the bulk of evidence within a current portfolio that we're currently seeing at this moment in time. Some people don't like to hear the word portfolio. It's having evidence, pieces of evidence to support that they've met the relevant occupational competency statements that's outlined in the employer confirmation guide. It does stipulate a minimum of 15 pieces of evidence, and I think it's been providing that overview of when you're when the learner's gathering evidence, is guiding the learner into the type of evidence that would reflect on more than one piece of evidence that's outlined in the employer confirmation guide, to ensure that we don't duplicate things moving forward and over again. And what we will do is, when we go through when we start provide the additional webinars and training on the employer confirmation guide, we'll provide some more examples to support you through that working forward. So it's like video evidence, photographic evidence, and things like that of the actual real life working. Also the project they're going to be doing out in industry as well, that could also be used to go towards the employer confirmation guide as well, so you're not duplicating things as you're moving forward. So as I say, we will provide more clarity on that moving forward, but it's not as we know it at the moment, where it's a portfolio of evidence that they're having to duplicate things over and over. We're trying to keep it to as minimum as we possibly can, and we will provide that guidance moving forward when we provide these events, like I've said, moving forward. I hope that answers your question. If we don't answer them or provide any clear clarity for you, please come back to us, and we'll try and do that accordingly. All right, thank you.
Thanks, Ian. Just on the theme of events, there was one question: are we planning any face-to-face events with colleges regarding, the rollout of the level 3s? It did ask specifically for this route, so I'm assuming that will be Bricklaying, but I don't know if you had any more info on that.
Yeah, and I mean, the thing is this, and you can imagine, ladies and gentlemen, at this moment in time, we're focusing on a lot of the face-to-face events are focusing on the foundation, the progression, qualifications, and regarding how to administer and carry out and mark and evaluate the practical project and the guided discussion, which covers both the foundation and the progression qualification. So we're doing face-to-face events on them. We're also, as we can know now, we're starting this on the level 3 at this moment by doing these trade-specific webinars that we would really love to do face-to-face, but unfortunately time is of the essence to try and introduce these to yourselves, so then we can move forward and do it accordingly. You're right, and hopefully, and I've no doubt, provided things don't get any worse, or that it's keep improving the way they are doing, then we hopefully are coming back out to you, commencing September again onwards, like we did earlier in this academic year, when we visited all the centres that's delivering the foundation and progression qualification this year. We went in and we did surgeries with them to make sure that they were comfortable, rather than trying to bring too many colleges together. We did go visit each individual centre, and we will do that again come September onwards. What will be happening from May, because up to press, we've got webinars and some CPD events that's running up till the end of April. Then we'll be doing another planning session again on keeping in touch webinars, but then we'll be doing the next round of support events, and they will either be face-to-face or webinars, and we will be doing them. So this just isn't going through now and leaving you saying, look, we've already done this now, we'll let you crack on with it and run with it. We're here to support you, just like we have done on the foundation and the progression. And I'm hoping people that's on here today will recognise that, where we've visited nearly every centre going, to be honest, and every satellite centre or sub-centre, we've visited them as well to make sure we can get to see the people that's delivering these. But it's not always word gets passed down, unfortunately. We have contacted a few centres, and unfortunately they never came back to us, and now they're chasing us to try and make provision to try and go along and meet them accordingly. The CPD events that we're holding, and I'll use this as an example, it's a full day event. We're doing a morning session on the project, and then the afternoon session on the guided discussion. Come next September, we'll be doing some surgeries, face-to-face surgeries, definitely from September, because by that time you'll have had an opportunity to go through the qualification handbooks, to look at the assessment packs, probably to have more questions, especially on the employer confirmation guide, and then we can start to provide that support moving forward even further. But we will definitely be doing further events, because we fully understand this is new, and what we don't want to do is just say, there you are, it's all on the website, lead it to it. We're not like that at all. We want to make sure that you get the support that you require. But what you've got to make sure as well, please keep checking the website for the events that are being held, because the message don't always get passed down from management. It sometimes gets lost in emails, unfortunately, or whatever. Also, look out for the monthly updates that we send out to you, because when the events are planned and scheduled, we also put them on there as well, so people are aware that you know exactly what's happening, where you can attend and when you can attend. So there's a lot going off, so please keep your eyes open. And as I say, if you're not on the mailing list for the employer confirmation guides, sorry, not the employer, for the monthly updates, please contact your line manager and ask them to make sure they disseminate it down to you. Obviously, we've got GDPR rules that we've got to comply with, and your managers are giving us that opportunity to contact through them, and then they said they would pass the information down accordingly. But you've always got his email addresses. But what we'd like you to do as well, if you've any burning questions, is collectively come together. So the brickwork section for this particular webinar, you may have 2 or 3 questions. Rather than individuals sending them to us, if you could collectively put some questions together, then forward them, and then we can either do it through a Teams meeting with you, see you face to face, or even respond by email, so you get that response with immediate effect. The only unfortunate thing is like last week, for example, I had 6 emails from the same centre from different people, practically all asking the same question. So if you just come collectively, it would help us tremendously. Thank you. I hope that answers your question. I know I went a bit long-winded, but
Thanks,
we'll get that message out there.
Just in supporting Ian's explanation as well, I'll put a couple of links in the chat. One is to again, they're both from the Skills for Wales website. One is to the training and events that we have put on and previously put on and plan to put on. And one is just a link to the Skills for Wales website. So in order to sign up for the email alerts and the most up-to-date information, if you click on that link and scroll to the bottom of the web page, you can subscribe accordingly on there. There has been a few more questions just quickly come in. Will the current level 2 diploma learners be able to progress onto this course?
Thank you. It's a really good question, and yes, they will be able to. What I'm doing at this moment in time, or we are doing at this moment in time, we're putting 2 mapping documents together. I'm really grateful for 4 or 5 centres that's viewed these draft document that I put together, and the mapping documents are as follows. One is for the current level 2 diploma, City and Guilds qualification, how it maps across to the new level 3 qualification. So there'll be the gaps there, and what you'll find once you see the document, red is that it doesn't map at all, amber means partly, and green it fully maps across. And I'm also doing it for the NVQ level 2 as well, where a learner completing level 2 framework was moving across to the new level 3 qualification. That will also be mapped across as well. As being a bricklayer mason myself, I've done that first, so the bricklaying one is the first one to be done. And what we'll then do is, now we've had the feedback from centres who's really pleased with it, and it's not going to meet everybody's expectations, but all going to be saying, well, really, we could, there's a little bit more information required. It does help you, ladies and gentlemen, the best way we possibly can, because all learners are going to be different. Some may be coming from different awarding organisations moving across. Some may have done different activities on site, different units on site once they've completed the level 2 framework regarding the optional unit. But once we've completed these, and it's in draft at the moment, is the brick one, we will then, the 2 documents will be brought together. So you'll have your level 2 diploma mapping across into the level 3. So a full-time learner who's completed that, what would he or she have to do, or they have to do when they move across? Same for the level 2 framework that just completed across to the level 3. We will then collect the information like I've done. We will then finalise it. It will then be in Welsh, in the Welsh medium as well as English, and it'll be put on the Skills for Wales website. And what I'm asking them to do is put it under the tab where it will be for the qualifications. So it will go under that accordingly, and hopefully it's side of the employer confirmation guide or by whatever, but it'll definitely be on the Skills for Wales website. We'll do one for each trade as well, so it just won't be left for the bricklaying or the main trades. We will do it for each trade area. And hopefully, and you can imagine the amount of work that is going to take, hopefully we can have them done in the next couple of months. All right, but as soon as they're done and we get the first one ready, I will let you know when we send our monthly updates out to you, that as soon as they're ready and where they're located, and then you can view them yourselves. All right, I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Ian. Yeah, we've had a few more. So due to the practical project being done on site, are training providers required to complete practical formative training throughout the year?
Yeah, gosh, you'll still have to do some form of assessment to make ensure learning has actually taken place, and it's internally and it's through your own for when you get your own inspectorate coming out as well, is to ensure that learning has taken place. And maybe this is the discussion you need to have, a strong discussion you need to have with your employer as well, to see what can be done on site and what training the learner would be able to receive before they actually carry out these relevant tasks moving forward. Although there'll be a level 2 stage, well, some learners, if they're moving across from the current level 2 framework, you're then going to have the other avenue where you've got learners just starting on these level 3 qualifications. So I would personally communicate with your employers to make sure that, first of all, they're comfortable on what requirements are, especially with the employee confirmation guides. You can discuss that between yourselves. Also, what you need to do then is look at formative assessment as well, because what you need to do is to assess that learning is actually taking place as you're moving forward, and then when your inspectorate comes out, they can see that you're following the guidelines accordingly. That's the way I would do that. And it's only getting your learner prepared for the assessment. It's no different to what you're doing now at this moment in time. Although it's unitized, you're still ensuring that the learner is ready before you put them onto that particular practical assessment. And it's like the knowledge test. You do a mock test with the learners first before you actually put them on the test, to ensure that they are ready to be able to move forward and hopefully successfully complete it. So it's getting the learners prepared, and the only way we can see it, and that's what we used to do when we were teaching. When we were teaching, we did some mock assessments with them, we did some practical, because what we've also got to remember as well is the professional discussion. That professional discussion is a new method of assessment. Yes, we may have been doing it for MVQs when we're going out there, doing some professional discussions with learners, collating that information. But this is now a professional discussion that majority of the learners will never have done. Yes, they may have done it through the guided discussion at foundation and progression, but that professional discussion, we've got to get that learner ready and prepared. And how do you prepare the learner for that? And again, it's by doing some mock discussions with that particular learner. When you're doing a current formative assessment at the moment, what you normally do is you normally ask the candidate first of all to review and mark his own or their own model or activity they've completed. Then you discuss it with them. That's how you carry it out, which is any good professional tutor does, which is excellent. But what we've got to do now is the same for that guided discussion, and it's the same for that professional discussion. So although we're talking about the professional discussion, the guided discussion is a great way of bringing them forward and getting them ready, in readiness for that professional discussion. So my advice would be, yes, you do formative, some training with them, definitely. Identify the gaps that they're going to need, and you'd work with them. But it's working collaboratively. And it's no different to what you're doing now with the current frameworks that we've got in place. So hopefully that answers your question. Thank you.
Thanks, Ian. We're down to the last couple of questions. I know we're starting to run out of time, so if anybody's got any last questions they want to propose.
Fine, Jason, we can go through the last slides. We're not going to go anywhere. And then if people still want to upload some questions, we can go back to them at the very end. And then if nobody's there, we can close from then.
Okay,
So,
well,
last questions?
these are the last couple we've got for now. So with the various entry requirements for level 3, the tutor could have a level 3 group with various knowledge, abilities and skills, all needing to be delivered different volumes of content.
What was that? Sorry, Jason. Sorry, it broke up on my Teams. Sorry.
All right. So with the various entry requirements for the level 3, the tutor could have a level 3 group with various knowledge, abilities and skills, all needing to be delivered different volumes of content.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It is, but this is where the planning would come in accordingly and plan it. I think it will be different to what we're used to at this moment. But when we think about it, when we get a learner that's starting partway through the course, I know it's only the odd learner that starts partway through the course. That's what can happen, where we get learners learning at different stages. This is going back to the teaching and the learning of it as we can move forward. But it's about the planning and it's identifying your individual learners. Once we get the initial transition period out of the way, where you're getting learners at site swiping across, it will all become a smooth. It'll become smooth with the delivery, because when you get a learner that's moving across from the progression, well, let's start with the foundation really. First of all, if the learner moves across from the foundation, gets employment, comes straight to the level 3, they do not have to take a back step because they've already covered the core units, the same as what the core qualification would do, so they can then just continue. If you get a learner that's been unfortunately not got employment at foundation and has to do the progression and then completes the progression and then comes across to the level 3, which hopefully they will, again, the learning that's being carried out is mapped directly across to the level 3 qualification. They do not have to duplicate anything. Test 1 is already completed. The only difference would be is, as we all know, the learner completing the progression moving across could take 6 months longer. It could take even longer than that to complete because of the work-based evidence. They've had no experience being on site and they would still need to complete the employer confirmation guide moving forward. But the learning and training that's taking place will be mirrored directly across. So it is a smooth transition and it's a lot more smoother than what we currently have at this moment in time. Thank you. I hope that answers your question. You say one more, Jason?
Yeah, there's one more. It's quite a long one, so I'm going to try and break it down. So you mentioned this sidestep across qualification means learners, hopefully I can incorporate this question correctly. So I think it means transferring learners from sort of a full-time course onto the apprenticeship and it being a negative stat in as far as data. I think that's what they're trying to get at.
Right.
With this question.
No, that's fine. I fully understand the data internally and things like that. If you get a learner that completes the progression and moves across, and I understand that's a simple format. If a learner is partway through his progression and he gets employment, then although it may be difficult for your stats, but surely it's got to be beneficial for the learner. Surely that learner can only benefit from that, because moving across, that means the learner, whatever learning's taken place, it'll still be with him. It's not having to redo anything. He's not playing catch up, apart from the work-based learning again, when he's got working evidence from industry to gather that experience being out there. So apart from a negative stat, to be honest with you, and I'm coming from a parent's avenue as well. If I were the parent of that boy or that girl doing that, that'd be absolutely superb, thinking that college has helped me partway through their course and I've managed to get employment through the training that they have provided me with, can only enhance the reputation of the college and benefit the college in the long run. And not only that, it means you're going to retain that learner, because that means they're going to continue doing the level 3 qualification. And in the long run, it means industry is benefiting from it, which is crucial. It really is. So thank you for that.
Thanks, Ian.
Is that it, Jason? Is that the last question, mate?
Just a comment from the person that submitted the question. They fully agree with what you're saying, and another college is put on as a college manager I can assure you, we never let stats get in the way of learner moving from full-time to apprenticeships. And I think that's
I
really
know.
encouraging, yeah,
Yeah.
because it's all about the destination for the learner. So
Yeah, and I hope you didn't think I was referring that to it, because I fully understand but tutors sometimes have that concern, whereas when you look at the college, that's the reputation of the college end of the day, and that's why the reputation is so high at the moment with colleges in Wales, to be honest. If there's no more questions, Jason, shall I move on to the final slides for now?
yes, I think so. There hasn't been any more questions coming, so yes, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we can move on then. Just a reminder, I know David did it early on. It's your feedback, ladies and gentlemen. We really welcome your feedback, and it's crucial. We are coming to an end of it, and you will receive a link asking you for feedback. And if I can please, and obviously the link, you'll also get the copy of the presentation as well, and you can have it in Welsh medium as well, because it's both in Welsh and in English. It's not just this one as you actually see there. The presentation is being recorded, so you can look upon it later on. It'll also be put onto the Skills for Wales website in the very near future, so they'll be retained there, like the foundation and the other ones as well as. But your feedback is crucial, and no matter what feedback you provide, we always act upon and try and take on board all of your comments and try to address all concerns wherever possible. So please complete the questionnaire. And finally, it's just to say thank you to you, your good selves, for attending, which we trust you found useful, and your excellent questions. We really appreciate that and your participation. And also a thank you to the presenters, Han Harrod, Jason and David, who unfortunately has had to leave us early, but he will be back with us shortly this afternoon. And to finally thank you for your time in attending the webinar. And take care, and we look forward to seeing you in the very near future. So thank you for attending.